iSARMs.com, the #1 place to learn about SARMs online.
Welcome everyone. Dylan Gemelli here today with a brand new video for you. And in today's video, I want to talk to you about the oral steroid Proviron. I just want to kind of give you the facts, the breakdowns, how to use it, what to expect with it, if there's any side effects, some misconceptions, just things of that nature. I want to give everyone a real nice, fully understanding on all of the above and all of the facts in general, just so there's no confusion on it, and so there's always a nice reference for facts when looking at Proviron, because Proviron's very popular and it does have some benefit and some use, but I want to convey all the facts on it so you can judge whether it's for you or not. So Proviron's definitely something that's more old school. It's going to be more legendary in the bodybuilding community. It really doesn't have much of any value when ran solo, aside from the increase in libido that you could see and maybe a little bit of estrogen help, but you're not going to see like size or a bunch of strength or anything from it. It can really help tighten things up a little bit, but it's just not profound. It's more popularly stacked in steroid cycles, and that's the way it needs to be ran. And I'll discuss all of that as we move forward. Now, you're not going to find Proviron prescribed anywhere in the US because it was never actually FDA approved, so it's not really used with traditional American medicine like something like testosterone is, or Anavar, where a doctor will actually, prescribe it to you. However, in Europe, it's actually used medically to help with like an androgen deficiency, and it also is used to help with fertility issues in men, and it makes it very different compared to other anabolic steroids, which have the adverse effect. So one of the things about Proviron is that with the old school bodybuilders, they used to use it as a form of protection from estrogen because they didn't really have anything. They didn't have access to SERMs or anti-estrogens, and SERMs didn't really get introduced into bodybuilding until the very late 80s and early 90s, so people didn't even have a post-cycle to really run on. And aromatase inhibitors didn't even come around until a decade after that. So bodybuilders relied on just pure luck, and they used Proviron to try to combat estrogen during this era in time because it does have anti-estrogen properties. However, don't kid yourself, it is not an aromatase inhibitor, and it does not at any means at all replace one, period. That shouldn't even be talked about, discussed, thought about, nothing. That is just absurdity. It has aromatase inhibitor effects. That's it. No way, shape, or form should that be substituted for an Aromasin or an Arimidex. Now, when certain aromatizing steroids are used, estrogen is obviously going to increase in the body because there's a conversion of estrogen as a result of the entire aromatization process. Okay, that's going to result in some estrogenic side effects like water retention, increased blood pressure, gynecomastia. There's a list that's long. These are your main things to be concerned about. Now, some bodybuilders, during that era of time actually relied on not being genetically prone to estrogenic problems. But if you were gyno-prone, you were pretty much just out of luck, and that's just the way it is. So luckily, Proviron was around, and the smarter steroid users at least stacked it to get some sort of estrogen control in their cycles. It was definitely not nearly as strong as aromatase inhibitors that are used today, but it still helped to a point. It's better than nothing back then. So, because they didn't even know what an aromatase inhibitor was. Luckily, we have them now. We don't have to worry about it, and we've got it covered. So, how exactly does Proviron even help with estrogen, though? What is it? What's the function there? And it's important to remember that, like I said, Proviron is not the best way to fight estrogen. It is not an aromatase inhibitor. I have to keep stressing this so there's no confusion, and I'm sorry to the people that actually get it through their head, but then there's like 100 others that don't. So understand why I have to keep repeating it. So if you add Proviron to a cycle, it does have the estrogen benefits. It helps with other aspects though too. which I'm going to discuss here as we move further. It has a multitude of benefits. When you're talking about estrogen control, Proviron helps by actually binding itself to the estrogen receptors and aromatase enzymes without activating estrogen at all. So it reduces estrogenic activity. Now, Proviron also occupies the aromatase molecules in order to prevent any estrogen conversion from testosterone. So these two actions work in synergy to actually help inhibit estrogen increase while using an aromatizing wet compound such as testosterone or D-bol, something like that. So then that moves us forward to the libido benefits that I discussed earlier. Now, it's a well-known fact by many that Proviron has libido-enhancing benefits because it is a DHT derivative. And if you've watched my video on DHT, which is dihydrotestosterone, then you can understand what that means as well. Now, it stacks well with DECA, for example, which has the opposite effect, and that gives you a nice balance. Remember, DHT is a male sex hormone, so increasing DHT is always a good thing when it comes to increasing your sex drive. Then we go on to the toxicity. As you know, with oral anabolic steroids, there's always that major concern for high levels of toxicity moving through your body. Now, you're going to assume that Proviron is also liver toxic. Nonetheless, it's actually not true. It's structurally altered with the addition of a methyl group at the carbon 1 position, which allows it to survive the first liver pass once swallowed. All in all, though, Proviron is not, and I repeat, a 17-alpha alkylated oral, so it does not strain the liver, and it allows you to use it long term without the fear of harming your liver. So that's a major plus in Proviron's favor. Okay, so then that brings us to the topic of SHBG, which is your sex hormone binding globulin, and that's a hormone that decreases free testosterone in the body. Now, Proviron is one of the best compounds for actually binding to SHBG, and that creates a higher free test to total test ratio. So we all know that free testosterone is what really matters. So adding Proviron to your existing cycle will make the steroids you're using actually work a lot better. And as I said earlier, using Proviron by itself is basically useless. It can do a few things for you, but it should be in addition to your cycle because it really improves the results from the other compounds you're already moving. It's like the ultimate support. It's like the Pippin to the Jordan, okay? Although it's not as good as a Pippin, but it's still, what I'm saying is it's that kind of support, and it adds that kind of support. More like a Dennis Rodman to the Jordan, that kind of support, you know, where it's a very damn good support, but it's not on that extra level. But it's definitely something very strong to add to a cycle. Now, there's a lot of confliction out there about the use of Proviron in post-cycle therapy. So then you go back to that old school era again where SERMs weren't even available yet. And guys needed help in this regard, so Proviron is what they used to recover. Now, today things are different. You've got different ancillaries. You've got your Nova, you've got your Clomid, you've got Aromasin. So Proviron doesn't really need to be used in PCT anymore. It's true that Proviron is not nearly as suppressive as other compounds because, you know, it's used as a fertility drug in Europe. That alone tells you about the suppression, but it still is slightly suppressive, and that would be counterproductive in a sense. But let's just put it this way. It's not the best option for PCT. I've seen plenty of blood work showing it to be just fine to be used in PCT at a minimum of 4 weeks. But if you've been running it all cycle, I really wouldn't continue it on during PCT. If you're just introducing it, I say you're okay to do it because I've seen the proof. That's up to you. I would never put it in as a requirement whatsoever. And you are taking a risk somewhat, but I just don't see it because I've never seen any issue. But that right there is debatable, and that's something that you would really need to decide on your own. Now, the general dosing on Proviron is 25 to 50 milligrams per day, and the half-life is 12 hours. It is detectable for up to 2 months, so that's a lengthy detection time for an oral compound. So if you're getting tested, beware of that. Cycle lengths on how long you can cycle, it's dependent. But you can run it 20 weeks on a 20-week cycle with no problem whatsoever, period. That's just dependent on how long you want to run it, what you need it for, etc. So that's really Proviron for you. That's the facts. That's how to do it, how to run it, everything you really need to know about it. So Dylan Gemelli, signing off.
I saw